Have you noticed through your eyes that their perception has changed by really exploring the world at such a young age?
I am actually really happy that they got this experience and this exposure to different countries, different people, different cultures. We all always sent our girls to local schools, by the way. So we didn't like international schools where everyone is, speaking English and you don't really get in touch with the local culture. So they have always been to local pre-kindergartens, local kindergartens in Thailand. They've been to three different places where they went to a local kindergarten. And I can really tell that it's not scary for them anymore to be in a new place with new people. And they're very independent. They're still young, but they know very well that there are different people with different habits, doing different things, speaking different languages. And I really love that they are so open-minded and adaptable.
Welcome to the show, Gosia. Thank you so much for coming on today. How you doing?
Thank you so much, Tyler, for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Definitely, definitely. It seems like it's a perfect fit for the life that you're living and the podcast topics. So when I came across your page and what you're doing, I felt like it'd be a really good fit. So thank you again for making the time.
Thank you too.
So what we'll get started off with, if you don't mind, just kind of sharing your story and just your experience of, parenthood over the last few years and before parenthood, what led you to where you are today. And excited to hear that story.
Yes. So I'll give you my story in a nutshell. I'm Gosia and I was born in Poland, but I grew up in Belgium. And my husband is Belgian as well. And already pre-kids, we had this feeling of wanting to travel. And at some point, we also felt that we wanted to live somewhere for a longer period of time to really get to know local culture and habits and get to know local people. So we started to look into the option of emigrating and moving somewhere for a longer period of time. And we started looking around job wise, and my husband got a job offer in Bangkok, Thailand, which was very exciting for us. We hadn't really lived anywhere else apart from Belgium. So that was quite a big step to take, but we took on the adventure and we moved there, the two of us. And we also knew at that point that we wanted to start a family. So we had two girls, two daughters who were born in Bangkok, which was also quite an adventure. And I'm happy to talk more about that too. And since then, we have lived for 4 years in total in Thailand, but we also moved there a few months later on. We traveled there as well. And we are now living in Portugal for the last about 2 years. So, yes, we've had some different experiences with our little family, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. I find that so cool that you guys were just all over the place and
It
just such a
feels
big
like
leap.
it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and such a big leap too, I'm sure, like going, from where you were at and then going to Thailand. I'm sure it was just a completely different world.
Yes, it
But
was.
I guess the first question that I'd love to know more about would be your experience with birth in Thailand, because that was the one thing my wife too, and prior to this, so she's like, "Oh, you got to ask about that," just because it's so different too, because birth in different countries, and especially here in the U.S., like just approach so differently, and to get that more of that holistic approach and more of that like mother first style versus the
Mhm.
medical in your face kind of medical way is very like minimal here, and the primary is more of that medical kind of in your face. And I know Southeast Asia and even different countries in Europe too are different, but
Mhm.
I'm sure your experience was very unique. So I'd love to hear whatever you feel comfortable sharing about that.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm really happy to share about that because it's been such a very interesting experience. I've had two births there. Maybe just for information, the first was a C-section, and my second was what they call a VBAC. So it's like a natural birth after a cesarean. So I've had two very different experiences, but they were very interesting. So what I learned about Thailand is you might not expect this, but there's 75% rate of C-sections in Thailand, actually, because Thai women don't like the idea of being in pain or discomfort. So they found it quite strange as a Western woman that we actually want to try for a natural birth. And even I wanted to go unmedicated, like fully natural. And that for them is like a very strange idea. Like, why would you want that? Why would you want to have pain if you don't have to have pain? And I don't know why specifically C-sections is for me. And as a Western woman, or Western people, we rather only do C-sections if it's only medically necessary. But in Thailand, it's actually the preferred choice, both for the doctor, for whom it's more convenient, as well as for women there. And when I asked my Thai friends, like, why would you really want to go through a C-section? It also turns out that they go to, how do you call that in English? It's like someone who predicts your future.
Like a
What would
medium or
be
a psychic?
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
medium or a psychic. And it's like very common for people. Like everyone has one and they predict like things that happen in the future. And they would also pick like a lucky date for your baby to be born. So it's very important, like for your baby to be born on that specific day, which explains why, of course, they then have to go for a C-section. So that was like a very cultural, like very interesting cultural difference, one of many that like really struck my attention when I was there. But other interesting differences is that a lot of attention is put on the mother. So what I also found very interesting is that when you give birth in a Thai hospital, it's the most common thing is to have your baby like permanently in like the baby room where all the nurses take care of your baby. And it's not common to have the baby with you in the room. They would only come and bring it if you decide to breastfeed. They would bring it like every 3 hours. But then the rest of the time, you're actually not supposed to like be with your baby or take care of it because the nurses take care of you. And they like, do everything that like they massage, they do everything that you need to like, have to recover. And they really put a lot of attention, for you as a mom to recover. And it's quite strange for them when a Western woman says, like, I actually want my baby like with me all the time, like I can do it. Like for them, it's very strange. And they also have like a lot of like options as a woman postpartum to do like special treatments, massages. You would have someone normally with you that cooks for you during at least like the first 1, 2 months, even longer sometimes. So, like the mother is very much placed in the center of the attention more than actually the baby. While like in the Western world, all the attention goes to the baby, and we sometimes even like forget about the mom after she gave birth. So those are like some really interesting differences. But I honestly like I really enjoyed giving birth in Thailand because people are just so warm and encouraging. And during my second natural birth, like I had a whole team of nurses that were like cheering me on to push the baby out. So it was actually like really, I've had some like really warm and very good memories of giving birth in Thailand, even though I had to like sometimes push a little bit for my preference to be, listened to because they have a very different way of doing things for sure.
That's so cool, and kudos to you for just speaking up. I know that that's a tough thing. I mean, my wife has really no issue. She's been through like a lot of different medical stuff. So when it came to birth,
Okay,
it was
okay,
like
wonderful.
she was ready to tell everybody exactly how she wanted to hear it. But that's a big thing. I
Yes.
mean, like you said, especially in like the Western world, it's the medical profession is kind of like uses more intimidation type like tactics, and it's hard for mothers, especially young mothers too, just to like get their point across and to actually be respected and to be heard. But it's so cool to hear, even though they did it differently, that you kind of presented the way that you wanted it done and they respected that. And yes, so interesting too to hear about like the focus mostly on the mother, because that's something I was just having a conversation recently with my sister-in-law about that, and we were talking about how like the baby's born, and just like you said, it's kind of forgotten about with the mom. Like with my wife, for example, she went to her postpartum follow-up with her OB, and there were barely any questions to her about, like any, and not that she had dealt with it, but like any postpartum depression or anything. It's just like, oh, how have you been feeling? Have you been having any, thoughts or
Exactly.
whatever? And that's it. And it just stops there. So it's,
Exactly. That's very striking. Like as a pregnant woman, you get not only so much, attention from people in general, like, oh, you're pregnant, and also like a lot of checkups. But then once the baby's born, it's kind of like as a mom, you're just like you're assumed to just, get back to shape really quickly. There are no like mental checkups, physical checkups. Like it's very limited compared to that time that you're pregnant. So it's very interesting how that is different. And I think it wouldn't be bad for like the Western world to like, have a bit more of that Asian, viewpoint of having like more attention for the mom, like not only for the baby, obviously the baby is important, but like there's just so much that needs to be followed up in terms of like physical needs and mental needs for a woman postpartum, for sure.
yeah, I completely agree. It's definitely like a part of the birthing process that needs to be focused. They call it the fourth trimester for a reason, right?
Yes, it's so true. It's really so true. Absolutely.
Yeah. And as far as just like looking back at your experience too, I'm sure that there were times where, certain anxieties kind of came up, like probably wanting to be more closer to what's familiar when giving birth. But how did you guys work through that at times where, being in a country that maybe from the outside looking in, if you look at the medical system, might not be as advanced as Europe or the Western world in general? Like, how was that anxiety just like for you guys to get through it and to just trust that trusting that, being in a very different place was going to work
Mhm.
out, to your expectations?
I think both of us are quite like people that go with the flow, to be honest. We're not like super like anxious. We're more like trusting in a good outcome. Maybe some people call it naive, but so far it has worked like in our favor to be like a little bit naive and just, go with the flow of things. And I've always like, I guess, really just trusted my body. I just thought I had like this trust that everything would be okay. And also I had a doula. So I had a person who was very like familiar with the system there, who could communicate. Because of course, at some point in your delivery or labor, you get to a point where it's not so easy anymore to communicate, especially in a different language, in a different culture. So for my two births, I had a doula who was very experienced in births in Thailand, and she could like really, she knew my birth plan. She could communicate for me, and I felt like a lot more confident because I had her by my side and we knew each other so well, and so that also really helped for sure.
I love that. Yeah, the trust is extremely important, and hey, call it naive, call it whatever you want, but there's so many things to be worried about in the world today, and
Yeah.
especially when it comes to giving birth. Like there's just so many things that you could get in your head
Yes.
about and focus on that could go wrong, but you got to trust that it's going to work out.
Yes, I think so.
I love that. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit more about post birth. Obviously, so you have two children. How old are they again? Your two girls?
So now they are 3 and 5. Well, my oldest will be 5 in 1 month.
Awesome. So they were how old when you guys left Thailand and moved to Portugal?
So my youngest was 10 months and my oldest was 2.
So how have
So
you
yeah.
noticed, given the the ages that they were and the ages that they are now, like how have you noticed, particularly with travel in general, like how has that affected their perception on many different things? I mean, so many. I'm sure you kind of could look at other children that might have been in kind of one area their whole lives, and then look at your own children and how they've developed. But how have you noticed, like through your eyes, that their perception has changed by really exploring the world at such a young age?
So we had maybe just for info, like between our moves from Thailand to Portugal, we had like almost 1 year, let's say, of travel where we came back to Belgium for a few months. We went to Portugal just to kind of like look and see around. And then we like just traveled. We went to Poland to visit like my family there. We traveled to Sweden. We traveled around Europe until we decided like, okay, now we're really like ready to settle and like, take leap of faith and move to Portugal. So there was like almost a year of like full-time travel between Thailand and Portugal. And to answer your question about our daughters, I am actually really happy that they got this experience and this like exposure to different countries, different people, different cultures, because I can see that they, first of all, they're like very independent. So if they have to like, because we all always sent our girls to local schools, by the way. So we didn't believe in like, we didn't like international schools where everyone is, kind of like speaking English and you don't really get in touch with like the local culture. So they have always been to like local pre-kindergartens, local kindergartens in Thailand. They've been to like three different places where they went to a local kindergarten. In Portugal, it's now the second because we've moved. So they have been like two different local kindergartens. And I can really tell that it's not scary for them anymore to be in a new place with new people, with even people not speaking their language. And like they're very independent, maybe just like us trusting the process, going with the flow. And they're very flexible also. So if, it's like a different meal, different food, different habits, they go along with that. They're like not, used to like one particular thing. And that's the only way to do things. And I also really love that they are very like open-minded for other cultures, other skin colors. They're still young, but they know very well that there are different people with different habits, doing different things, speaking different languages. And I really love that they are so like open-minded and adaptable.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, the first 7 years of life are really the most impressionable for children. And to be able to see, like you said, so many different skin colors and hear so many different languages and try so many different foods, like it's just going to set them up for such a like open-minded future as an adult and, a developing child. And it's so admirable and something that I think would solve a lot of the world's problems if kids could do that. And I know it's not a reality for every parent too,
I
but just
thought I thought the exact same thing already many times, to be honest. Yeah.
seriously, yeah, just getting
Mhm.
out there and talking to different people and like learning early on that people are different, but it's hard. I mean, so many people are just kind of in their bubble and in the world and only know that. And when they go outside of it, unfortunately, it's like taught generational things that like you don't like this type person because they speak this language or because they have this skin color, and it's really unfortunate. But yeah, kudos again to you guys for doing that for your kids at such an early
Thank
age, and yeah, it's gonna set them up for a great future.
I hope so. Thanks.
That's so cool too, like hearing about the education. So I'm would your like do your girls know multiple languages or at least know like portions of multiple languages at this age?
Okay. Yeah, so we've always like since they were born, we taught them two languages. So they speak Dutch with my husband and they speak Polish with me. Because I like to, even if I speak Dutch with my husband, it's like I'm bilingual Dutch Polish. I always like to have like the family language for them to be able to speak with my parents, with my other family in Poland, and just for their brain to develop, and to be like multilingual. I think it's like such a gift that you can pass on to your kids. So we always like they always talked since they were born. They were exposed to Polish and Dutch, and that's the two languages that they are fluent in. And now, since they've lived in Portugal, or especially since they went to school in Portugal since 1.5 years, they're also fluent in Portuguese. So that's like the three languages they are fluent in. And then English, they know like basic things because they can hear me talk English sometimes. And their kindergartens or pre kindergartens in Thailand were English and Thai. So they used to speak also like basic Thai, but now they forgot that already since we moved to Portugal. So I would say a little bit of English.
I That's the one thing that my wife and I have noticed, when I first traveled internationally too. I'd gone to Colombia, well, different places, in like the like Central America and then South America. But Colombia was like the first real experience of a country where not everybody spoke English, and it was such a humbling experience because like that's the one thing that I've realized as I've gotten older is like Americans just have this way about them. It's like we speak one language, and yeah, we might like, learn certain things in school growing up, but the one thing about the world is like most people should know another language, and that's just like the one thing that I feel like when I look at our culture, I just shake my head. It's like, why are we not pushed to learn different languages throughout our life? Because it's so useful, and just to think that like everybody should be able to communicate with you because you speak English is just not fair. And then one thing, the Americans, yeah, I think, I mean, there's a
I
lot
can
of things.
understand it, but like in Europe, if you just travel like 1 or 2 hours, you're in a different country and, you have a different language. So it's like you're more exposed to like from a young age on to like, you would kind of know the languages of your neighboring countries. And so I can understand in the US, you're like such a big continent country, where you would go travel for hours and not really encounter any other language. So I can understand you have like a different environment, I guess. And of course the fact that almost everyone or like many people speak English also. So they would like begin to English, in English to you. So it's more difficult, I imagine, for you, to pick up different languages as well.
It is, yeah, especially like not being exposed to it at such a young age.
Mm.
I've been for years working as an adult really to like try to work on Spanish, and it's just so hard, like, because you're so, and especially with, the different like intonations that you try to like rolling my R's is so hard. It's just
I
something,
understand. I
we don't do.
understand.
But yeah,
They
that
could, for example, maybe in America, like offer one of like, for example, here in the kindergarten, like they have like 1 hour of English. So even like the Portuguese kids, they're exposed to like a different language. And I think it's useful already from like a very young age to at least like just be exposed to other languages. And I think it makes it easier later on to learn other languages.
definitely, yeah. We'll occasionally just like put on Spanish for I mean, she's only 8 months old, but we'll just put it like on in the background just so she hears it,
That's great.
like
That's really
wanting to learn.
great.
But that's so amazing that, your kids have been exposed to so much. And as far as just neurological development, I can't even imagine like what that's gonna do for like higher level learning as they get older. It's amazing. That's so cool to see.
Thank you.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit too about was, like obviously anybody who's listening that wants to travel the world, I think the one big thing is how do you do it? Like being able to work remotely or just kind of find means to do things. I know you said your husband had a job in Bangkok, so I'm sure that is part of it. But just for anybody that's listening that like really wants to get out and explore the world, but doesn't really have the means to, like, do you have any tips? And I know you kind of have your own things going on too, with your own business, but do you have any tips for anybody that might want to work remotely or just do things that give them the flexibility to travel internationally, but are currently struggling just figuring
Of
that out?
course. Well, I think that, nowadays, like there's so many possibilities to work online. So for me personally, it definitely was like a jump in the unknown. And again, like maybe a little bit naive and trusting, the universe. But I actually had like a really well-paying government job when I left for Thailand. So it was like a pretty big decision for me to leave that behind because it gave me like a lot of job security, a good income. But I also started feeling unhappy in that job because I lacked freedom and the flexibility, and I really wanted to become my own boss. And for my husband, after leaving Thailand, like after 4 years, we decided to move to Portugal. And he also had to become his own boss, like he had to start his own online business because there was no way that he could like continue his job in Portugal. So both of us had like a pretty scary decision to take. So my first piece of advice would be, that if this is really something you want to do, you will have to, take the risk. So I think that there's so much like personal growth that comes when you really step out of your comfort zone and you just do it, you just go for it. So I think, like that's one thing, like you just have to, take the leap at some point if you really want this. And secondly, what I also did is you can go for some like online jobs that you can now easily find, like with Fiverr and Upwork. You can do like customer, service jobs. Like there's like so much out there that will give you like a steady income while you build something for yourself. It's really truly yours, an online business. Like in my case, it's content creation. I sell online travel guides. I do online coaching. But in the very beginning, you can start by taking a job that gives you a more stable income while you build up your own online business, which is for me personally, like what I'm the most passionate about. And meanwhile, I was able to like quit the other freelance work that I did and fully focus on my own online business. So that's like one option that you could do if you want to have like an income more, like a more stable income in the beginning.
Yeah, the leap is the most important part too, but it's also good to know, the practical stuff like freelance work and things like that. There are so many things out there. And I think also for people that are on the fence about it, it's like overwhelming. There's so many different things that could be done, and there's so many things that you're like, oh, that's already saturated with, the workers already. That's not something else I need. But there are so many options out there. But like you said, it's that first leap. And my wife and I have so we left where the state that we grew up in 2018, and we've just really traveled, like lived in 6 different states. We've had like 11 different homes that we've lived in, and
Oh,
it
wow.
all just kind of started to that, like, you just take that initial leap. And I'm more of like the practical numbers, like, okay, we have this much money, we could do this. And my wife is the complete, thank God for her, she's like the opposite of like the trusting, like everything's gonna work out, you don't need to worry so much
Yeah,
about it. But it's a good
we are
balance
the
at
same
least.
then, me and your wife.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good balance to have, like the more trust and then the more like kind of logical, and we both kind of meet each other in the middle. But yeah, I mean, like when we first did it too, the scariest thing was just taking that leap, and now it's like it's second nature. I feel like anytime it's like, well, I'm feeling a little bored here. All right, let's just up and go. And then
Exactly. It really becomes second nature. And it's all about just taking that initial risk and that initial jump. And yeah, I truly believe there's like so many remote options. And maybe one of you could continue their job remotely, or you just have to like really, really want it, really look into it. And you're the only one that can make it happen, really. So, yeah.
yeah, and the creativity, I mean, everybody has like their own skill, regardless of, what you might think might be too much of something out there. Like, you all have something so unique to offer to the world, and whatever it
Absolutely.
is, just pull the trigger.
Yes, absolutely. That's it.
This might be more of like a selfish personal question, but one of the things, like I had just mentioned, we've traveled quite a bit and moved all over. And I think now also we're kind of at the point where like we've traveled so much, and more so primarily within the US. We have done, a bit of international travel, but I'd say like most of the hopping around has been within the US. But have you guys, or do you think you're kind of at that point now that as your kids grow a little bit older and you've done so much early in their life, that you kind of have that draw after traveling so much to settle in a little bit? Because I think that that's kind of where we're at, like with all the moving and all the up and going, we're getting a little bit of that itch to like settle down a bit. But I wonder your perspective too, because you guys obviously have done, like the whole other end of the world and lived all over the place in different cultures. But I guess, how you feeling now? Like, do you want to just keep continuing that as your kids grow old, or is there like a medium you're feeling?
Well, that's a very good question, Tyler, because me and my husband are actually talking about that a lot. And it's like, a big topic in our family. Um, so what we are feeling is partially similar to what you just mentioned. Like we have traveled a lot and we have actually never had a real family home because in Thailand we knew it was temporary. It was offered by the employer anyway. So it was like not something we could really turn into our real, cozy little family home. And then we knew all our next homes were temporary. So now we are finally, hopefully, having our first family home here in Portugal. We found and bought a house. We are renovating it. So we are now actually living in like a temporary rental home until the renovation is finished, hopefully this summer. So that's another whole adventure. But we are now truly feeling also the same of wanting to have a home base for our family, somewhere that we can really feel home and that we can keep returning to when traveling. That feeling of like, oh, it's good to be home after you've traveled, to really have that. So we want to have a permanent home base also for kids to have, school, to have to feel really at home somewhere. But we would love to keep traveling. And, for our kids also to keep being exposed to other cultures, to just discover the world together. It's something that we really love to do as a family. And one option that we're actually actively keeping in mind is the idea of house swapping. I don't know if you know it, but you could swap your home with someone else around the globe. And that's one way that we're thinking of hoping to travel also for longer periods is, for example, by house swapping. So that's one idea we're having in mind for the future. So to answer your question briefly, yes, we definitely also feel the need to have a home base and really excited about having our first home here. But we also hope to keep traveling as a family for sure.
I love that. Yeah, that's kind of refreshing to hear because I'm the one that, is always like, let's just keep going, let's keep going, let's keep going. But I also, there's definitely part of me that also wants that, settling down. And I think too, when you kind of get it out of your system, so to speak, and travel as much as you do, there comes that point. But it's also not like, just because you settle down, like you said, it doesn't mean that you're locked into somewhere forever.
Yes,
Like you could easily go,
exactly.
take a week or 2 weeks or whatever that might be. And um,
Exactly.
yeah, cool.
Absolutely. That's what we hope for too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Hey, well, when we get the itch again, want to go to Portugal, we could talk about house swapping.
Yes, absolutely. I've actually only been very briefly in the US for a wedding. So I've almost seen nothing. So I would love to visit the US one day.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one thing my wife and I always laugh about it because we've been to like Asia and we've, traveled a bit to Central and South America. And the one thing that we've never done is travel to Europe. And we were going to travel in 2020. We got married and we got married like right pretty much in the heart of the pandemic, so we weren't able to go then. We were going to take like a month-long backpacking trip through Europe and we never got it. And then
Oh, so
same
sad.
thing with our my 30th birthday, which is coming up in like two months, and we were going to do it then, but we have like another kind of whole life change that's happening currently, so we're like, we're going to have to push that off. So yeah, we'll get there for sure. I've
So we are
never
a
been.
perfect match in the future for house
Definitely,
swapping.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, and I know you talked a little bit too about, like kind of what you're doing as far as, your offerings with your business and your online business and how you're kind of making that work. But if you could give some listeners who are currently either starting to travel or traveling with their little ones, like what are some of the biggest and most important tips that you've picked up for traveling with young children, whether that's on the plane or by train or however it is? Like, what are some pretty simple and effective things that you've noticed that have made your travel a bit easier with young kids?
So I'm going to start by saying that if you're looking for the more practical tips, what to pack, what kind of toys to take, there's a wealth of information, that you can nowadays easily look up. And of course, I love Instagram because I'm a content creator on Instagram. And I also share a lot of tips on my account on what to bring on the plane, what works really well for us. So that's the kind of things that, you can very easily, I think, look up, depending on the age category of your kids. For me, what I actually love to give as the main piece of advice, which I find the most important and which is often I think not really mentioned online, is to involve your kids in the traveling process. So this is for me bigger than what to pack, because you will figure things out as you go along, and the more you travel, you will know exactly what to bring and how to do it. But I think if you can involve your kids in the whole traveling process, even before you actually do the trip, for me, that's so valuable and so helpful in avoiding any, difficulties during the trip. To give you an example, like before we travel, I would already like talk to the girls about the destination that we're going. We would look up like fun facts about, the trip or the like destination to ask, what would they like to see there or do there so that they really feel like, part of the whole experience and, that you're like actively listening to them. And also, when we pack, they would like pack their own little trunky that they have, and I feel like that really helps a lot. So when we travel and there's like, I don't know, a delay or something unexpected that happens, it's not like, oh, my parents took me on this trip and now look what's happening. And, I'm going to cry a lot. It's more like I feel they are already involved from the start and it's something like we're experiencing and doing as a family. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like that is just something that for us just works really well to like involve them from the very beginning in the whole experience.
That's fantastic advice. I love that. Yeah. And I feel like then it makes them more proud of the whole experience. Like it's
Mhm.
something that they initiated. And like you said, I'm sure it makes travel delays and things like that easier. One memory that I have when I was like really young was my parents booked a trip for us to go to Jamaica when I was probably like 8 years old. And I remember my dad, we had like a globe in my dad's room, and my dad would show me, like, this is where we are and this is where we're going to go. And that just solidified that excitement so early on. And I remember the whole time, I'm like thinking, wow, I'm on this plane and I'm going here. And it just like made me so excited as a kid. So yeah, I feel like that advice is just fantastic because kids will then be a lot more aware instead of like, oh, mom and dad booked this trip and I'm going. Oh, I have to be away from my friends. And like, now it's like,
Yes,
oh, I'm involved in it.
exactly. Exactly, exactly. And you can like really, I mean, depending on whether it's like just a vacation that you want to like switch off and just, relax and bond as a family. But I also like, I love to like, make it like a learning experience for all of us. So we like, try to learn a lot of things about the place that we're going to visit, but also like, to involve them and like see what they want to see there. And it's, I think one of the most fascinating things for me about family travel is to see the destination through the eyes of my child. So maybe I would like, of course, I'm going to like decide on a couple of things that we're going to see and do there. But I'm also sometimes surprised by like the activities that they think or the things that they want to see. And to be able to experience a place like through their eyes, I think is for me like one of the most wonderful things about traveling as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. Having kids, I feel like just does that. Like even the most simple
Mhm.
things with an 8-month old now that we have, just seeing like that carpet on the ground is fascinating. And it's like, but I just walk on that every day. It's nothing special to me, but
Exactly. Like you really appreciate your own, like the little things in life also.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have one last question for you. I ask every guest that I have on the show, and I'm
Mhm.
excited to hear your answer on this one. So, if you could offer just one piece of advice to listeners, whether that is a mindset tip or a practical parenting tip, what would that be and why?
Um, for me, also on the basis of everything that we talked about, like if I could give one piece of advice, it would be to embrace the unknown. Because I feel that when I talk to people, like there's a lot of sometimes fear of, traveling with their kids or for a longer period, maybe even to emigrate. Like there's like a lot of fear for the unknown. And it's like very easy to stay in your comfort zone. But for me personally, the kind of personal growth as well as family bonding that we've experienced by stepping out of our comfort zone and actually embracing the unknown is just like I can't even describe it. Like it's so beautiful, and I would recommend this to everyone to really experience the world together with your children. And by being, like not afraid to take the step, and like I say, like to embrace the unknown will bring you so many beautiful experiences. So I guess that would be like my one, like my number one piece of advice to everyone.
It's amazing. Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like just taking that initial step and then the way the universe works is things typically start working out for you, and even if they don't, then just being flexible in the process. And yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, Tyler.
So, as far as where people could find you, listeners that might be interested in more of what you're offering as far as services and just following along with your journey, because I know my wife and I love doing that and just seeing what you guys are up to. Where could they find you, and different
Wow.
websites, outlets, things like that?
So you can find me on Instagram at Wonder Mama Diaries, where I post about our daily life abroad as a family in Portugal. You can also find my online travel guides there, my online coaching. I coach families that want to travel more or move abroad. So you can find everything linked in my bio
Amazing. Well, check her out for all the
there.
listeners who enjoyed what you had to share. But I know I did. I loved hearing it, and just such an interesting story. And I know I said it a few different times, but props to you guys for taking the leap and
Oh,
trusting
thank
things are
you.
going to work out. It's really cool to see that. And yeah, I'm so excited to see as your kids grow old, just how cool of children and adults they turn into from having such fun experiences.
Well, thank you so much, Tyler. I really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Of course. All right. To all the listeners, we'll see you in a couple weeks, and much love.